At 7:32, I call this meeting of the RTM Finance and Budget Committee to order. With no objection, I'd like to change the order of the agenda because we have the heavyweights from the Board of Ed. And so why don't we move the Board of Ed first so those who are working can go home, since Dr. Adley's in the Castle Room still. So what I wanted to do is just go through, and the problem with printing this out is that I'm going to be using this to read it because it's kind of small. But I just want to quickly go through what they have on their cuts. And if you want to make a comment, that's fine, but otherwise, we just want to review what's there and what isn't. So on RC1, the physical education teacher and health insurance for that person is there, as well as payroll taxes. We have the curricular supervisor for the China Exchange, as well as the China Exchange is on there. Again, we have an assistant principal on there. We have department chairs. I'm not an attorney, but I think some of those will be kicked out simply because I think that they violate our contracts. And if we're going to put those in, we should probably up our legal expense by about $100,000.
Indeed.
Let's see. There's the campus monitor, moving the parking fees. And this was actually interesting when I read that. The parking revenue was not all going to the Board of Ed. Some of it was going to the Special Revenue Fund. And actually, the lion's share is going to Special Revenue Student Activity Fund as opposed to the Board of Ed. There's a general teaching supplies for the Genius Hour, physical education teacher. That's in Hinley. And then if you did not hear, we're not making any comment on it. Open choice was voted down at the meeting. As such, that increases the Board of Ed budget because there was more revenue than there was expenses. So the net increase, once you take away the liaison, is approximately $36,000. The athletic director was thrown in here for some reason. Groundskeeper, which is one of the things that we had mentioned. Ms. Julie Best put in the uniforms.
Jack, if I may jump in, I think at the end of the Monday night meeting, they withdrew the director of athletics cut.
Yeah.
Oh, they might have. Yes, I think you're correct.
No.
But it's not off the sheet yet, so.
It's not, it hasn't been withdrawn officially through our process.
As I said,
I stand corrected.
I know that there's things here. I know that during the process, things will come down.
Sure.
I thought that Julie did a very good job of explaining why uniforms should be done. Doesn't mean I like it at all. It's adding $8,300. Software maintenance is an ad for OpenGov. I think I've expressed my concern for OpenGov for a Board of Ed, being that it's not being used in any place in the tri-state area. And quite honestly, if I was the first place in the world to be using it for a Board of Ed in this area, I would be telling OpenGov how much are they paying me to use this as a beta test site so they can do other sales, and I wouldn't pay a damn thing for the next 5 years. But then that's all I used to do at Chase as opposed to here. There's a cut for technical support, which we also discussed. And then there's some consultant services, budget control. I believe it's a reduction of one budget control. There's some additional consulting services, professional development, eliminating the equitable instruction practices. Sorry, it's very small for me to read. And then there's a recommendation to increase ELP to 4% instead of 3%, which generates, I believe, an extra $3,000. And that's the current Board of Ed cuts on the table. I am a little disappointed that there's nothing going on the technology. I have put in a request to have a better understanding of what the specs are for the desktops, whether or not we're buying the box, new monitors and new keyboards, and that just simply because $915 for desktops in this day and age, when all we need is potentially a box, since they're not gaming, so they probably don't need new screens. Quite honestly, they cost a heck of a lot less than $900 out there for the new box, with an Intel 5 11th generation, a gazillion in their RAM and storage. So I've just asked for that, just to have a better understanding of that. Are there any comments on the Board of Ed? Cuts as they currently.
Can you hear me, Jack?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. The computers we're not replacing the monitors and we're not replacing the keyboards. This is really the CPU. They are an Acer CPU, 16 gigabyte computer. We'll send across the actual definition to the Veriton X4. I personally don't know what Veriton X4 is. I can recognize an Acer. I can recognize a 16 gigabyte computer, and we don't have any keyboards or monitors that we're replacing.
Great. I didn't think you would be doing that, but I thought it was worthwhile to ask. Are there any other questions or comments on what, I don't want to get into a deep discussion, because on Tuesday, the Board of Ed will be doing what they need to do, one way or another. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. This is why I said it should be real short, Duke.
Thank you.
So thank you all for showing up. Rich, I want to thank you again, because your turnaround on this stuff has been excellent and your explanations have been superb. Doesn't mean that I'm still happy with the 3.95, but that being said, there's still work to be done by the Board of Ed and then by the Board of Finance, and then possibly us. So everyone have a nice evening. To the Board of Ed members that joined us, thank you for joining us. To Lori, sorry that we were unable to hook up prior to the discussion. They did have the public hearing on Tuesday. As I was mentioning at the beginning of this meeting, I had on my left the Board of Ed meeting, and on my right was the Board of Selectmen meeting. And I was moving the volume on one or the other, depending upon who was speaking and if I wanted to hear them, or if I had not heard them 27 times already talk at public comment sections. It allowed me to go back to the Board of Selectmen. Anyway, thank you all very much. Good luck on Tuesday. Just for information purposes, the Board of Ed will also be going to a Monday meeting on the RTM education, and Ed has mentioned Ed's on, so Ed, you may want to say, how the Education Committee has looked at this budget is different than us. So it may be worthwhile to listen to theirs. Ed, is there anything you want to add?
We might be a little bit longer than your meeting.
I would imagine you are. but it's worthwhile, and if anybody needs it, it is listed on the town website. But if not, I can pass on their agenda. Again, Ed, everyone, thank you very much. Let's go to the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I didn't pass this out yet, but what I've been doing is playing with the Board of Selectmen budget that Kate provided. And that's because I like comparing apples to apples. So what I did is when I add back the 492,000 for the expense for the Park and Rec that they're moving into the special revenue fund. And I also add back the equivalent adjustments to revenue that they made in the revenue section of the budget. It changes some of the numbers. So town operations now appear to have, and I'm going off of budget that has some adjustments. So like the $500 that was taken off because we're not posting in newspapers anymore, and a couple of other things that Kate said that they can adjust or reflected in the numbers that I'm playing with. But the town operations are up 3.84%. Benefits are up 9.6%. Retirement and OPB is down 7%, yielding a total increase in the overall town operations of 3.84. When I net them against revenue, which because they don't show as revenue, what we do is come up with what the total things that need to be taxes. We then subtract the town revenue from that to determine what the tax has to be. But if I net the revenue there, the actual increase is just a little under 6%, because increase revenue is actually decreasing from what was the adopted 22 budget. And I went back to look at some of them. Interesting enough, building is down. If I look at the year to date, while we are moving people into the fire marshal revenue in the first 6 months is about 40,000, but they had budgeted 160 something. They kept it flat for next year. So maybe they had a little bit, but it had been about $140,000 before. So there's some major hits on the revenue side that I think is worthwhile having further conversations on. If I go back to how we've been looking at things of what is requested and put in town capital, last year the town requested 2.6 million in capital. This year, removing the Weed Beach initiative and dealing with that as a separate capital item will be 3.4, which represents a 31% increase in their capital requests. So when I look at their total town operations and their total capital requests, because one's much smaller, they're at approximately 6%. And when I net it from the revenue side, they're up approximately 9% on the town side. Now, that goes back to some of the adjustments that were proposed during the Board of Selectmen meeting, which had one reduction and virtually everything else was an add. So that was a little bit concerning. The other part of this exercise is I started to look at, we constantly talk about core versus growth. And I started to look at what is the growth in this budget. And some of the items I identified was the IT police, the person and a half from the fire marshal. There's some software that they're buying for the first time. There's the organic material at Highland that was agreed to. There's the drone and a couple of other things that represent growth. But just going roughly on some of this, if I go and look at just 5 or 6 of the large growth items, not counting some of the stuff that they added back, I'm not counting any of that, but rather, and I didn't even add some of the grants where they increased the grants yet. The Board of Selectmen operations goes from 3.8 to approximately 3.1. And that isn't even capturing all the growth. So we do know that there was another $45,000 added on for fuel costs as one of the adjustments. So this is getting back to whether or not either the Board of Ed or, for that matter, the Board of Selectmen could come in with a 2.5% core growth this year. And my opinion is they can't. Just point blank, they're not going to be able to. That being said, it doesn't mean that this is the year that one goes out and does additional expansions. This is the year where you get a little bit tighter on things and say, do I need to go and do this year? I'm going to publicly speak before the Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday. I'm going to have this out to Kate and Monica before that meeting. I think there's a great reliance, and I think Martha said it fairly well, that just because something can be bonded doesn't mean that we should just look the other way. The question is whether or not this is where we want to spend money at this time or even in the future. On development and building things, anyone who's tried to do any home improvement during the last 2 years has seen raw materials skyrocket, lumber costs go up, cement go up, distribution chain issues going that have increased costs, basic inflation going up. Even the tennis courts that were originally budgeted for $250, the bids came in at $350, and those are have expired. So we don't know that they're not 400 at this stage of the game. Usually I think that investing in certain infrastructure is a good thing because it will only cost you more down the road. Penny wise, pound foolish. I don't know that that's the case this year. I mean, we're not going to be living in 7% inflation for the next 2-3 years. And I think that we will see on some of these costs deflation going on. So, with interest rates and other things, and when supply chain issues can be resolved, I do think that it raises the question, is this the right time to make some of these investments? One of the questions that was discussed was that currently we have $7 million of available funds above the guidance of 12% of our operating budgets. But the agencies would really prefer that we're at 15%. And if we go to 15% and under the current operating budgets, that $7 million, I believe Jen mentioned, goes down to about $3 million, over and above what the guidance would have. Then when you add on the increases of the Board of Selectmen, which in total not counting capital, is about 1.6, and 4 million from the, which called, 4 million on the operations of the Board of Ed. At 15%, that takes it down another 600,000. So we're down to 2.4. That doesn't give the Board of Finance a lot of room to be using the general fund as something to be relying on to make a mill rate. The concept is what we can control is the operations to the best that we can and capital requests. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about. I have a fear that the town is becoming too reliant on that. I will say that the grand list ended up going up by almost 1.9%. That will generate a $1 to $2 million of incremental revenue if we kept the mill rate the same way. But just because the grand list went up, that should not be an invitation to spend it all. It should be an offset to the inflationary trends that we're seeing in fuel and other items that are going on. That's just my opinion. I'm also going to mention two additional two additional items for them to consider. One is that for years, not only myself, but David Martin have been talking about service fees for credit card usage at the town side. The Board of Ed implemented that over three, maybe 4 years ago. It's operational. I believe that we spend someplace in the neighborhood of $200,000 to $300,000 a year on credit card fees for which we're not reimbursed. Kate mentioned that they were considering it. I'd actually like them to finally put it in the budget and figure out how to get it done. The second step would be to figure out how to go and consolidate our merchant processors, because you pay less with the more volume you're doing. Lastly, when fines for the fire alarm and police were first introduced, the RTM, not the Board of Selectmen, but the RTM did not want it becoming a revenue source because they were concerned that that's what would happen. However, it's been years going on, and slowly but surely, this is the second year that we're moving things out of the police commissions who receives the police false alarms into the general budget. And there's probably a couple more things that they're paying for that really should be paid for by the town. Last year, they had approximately $54,000 on false alarm funds. They use it at times to pay for things that might not get through the budget process if it was put up against other things in the budget. I'm going to be recommending that the Board of Selectmen do what many other towns do, which is move the police false alarm funds into the general fund. And if they want to give the police commission money, give them a stipend. We pay for the police anytime the town operations pays for any policeman that's going out on the false alarm. I know I've paid it once or twice when the dog has set it off. But the fact of the matter is, you have to think a little bit, I hate the term out of the box, but it's time to really take a look at how we've been doing and not say that we're just going to do it the same way. So that's one of the other suggestions I'm going to make. I do not have the same belief on the fire commission getting the fire false alarms, because we don't pay for all of that. They're volunteers. So those are some of the proposals that I'm going to be making. I think, and just so to make sure that I'm saying this properly, the 12% is on the expense side is the Board of Finance floor. So it's not something that, floor to which if it falls below that as a result of emergency use, the Board of Finance would recommend a tax to put it back up to size. And on such special appropriations, the RTM has some additional powers. Their target is 15%, which I mentioned, and that really doesn't give them a lot of room this year. And I don't think the Board of Finance wants to. I don't think they want to be using these tools on a consistent basis and relying on that as a way to make payments. Last year we all know, but this is part how we present from F&B to the RTM. We reconcile what is requested because those are things that the two boards, I'm going to say the three boards can control, because debt service is controlled by the Board of Finance, not the Board of Selectmen. It's on their budget. And the grant is the library grant. So I take that out when I'm looking at the Board of Selectmen. But we do reconcile year-to-year requests and then how things were paid for. The mere fact that last year everything was at zero, the percentage that I used at 8.5 was giving credit that the what the Board of Selectmen requested for capital last year. It's not at the zero number of what we use to calculate the mill rate. So that's just where I am on the Board of Selectmen budget. I will end with something of a little bit of humor. There was a discussion on geese. I don't know if anybody heard that conversation. John Zagroski said if we were in Texas, there'd be a whole different way to deal with the geese at the fields to get rid of them, which I kind of thought was kind of funny. But after the meeting, I did happen to note with all the add backs that the Board of Selectmen did, that maybe we should take the Texas option up there, because to buy a goose is currently $7.99 a pound in any of the stores. And if that's maybe the revenue stream we need to pay for all the add backs that the Board of Selectmen members suggested. Not that I'm in favor of killing geese, mind you. Anyway, again, we do net both. I like netting the town revenue against the town expenses because it allows us to compare apples to apples to the Board of Ed to the Board of Selectmen. Go ahead, Jenny. I'm done. So Jenny, go ahead.
I was just going to say you could do, your geese problem, like 15 minutes of dogs off leash in any of the parks should take care of that. So
my dog would take care of them all
in a heartbeat. You make both both groups and the dog people and the park people happy, and you lower your geese mitigation costs, maybe.
I will tell you that I live across from the cemetery and there's ample geese there. But my house and my neighbor's house both have dogs that are out there roaming around, even though mine tends to be on a leash more than theirs. Geese don't come over and fly over to the other side of the road. So now the fox the fox just looks at us and runs away. Anyway, any other comments or anything on the Board of Selectmen? they're gonna be voting on, go ahead, James. Do you
Yeah,
have
no,
a
I was just
comment?
gonna, yeah, I just had a comment going back to your point about, taking a pause on certain construction and the cost associated with it. It's not the first time. When we had the credit crisis, way back when, we certainly deferred doing the Weed Beach project, and obviously for a different dynamic, but it's a precedent to sort of think smartly about moving forward with infrastructure spending.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing that I meant to drive by again today, I do like the fact of them possibly adding back the swing set that they have over to Baker Field. And it is going to be ADA compliant. It costs some money. But my question is, I've gone with my grandson to the Baker Field playground, and it's up a little hill. So if you're going to put a swing set there, don't you need to have an ADA compliant path to get to that swing set and that playground, which I don't think is part of the cost. So I just going to want to confirm that it's up a little hill, which is why I meant to swing by today and went up the wrong road, and then got distracted. Anyway, anything else on these budgets? Continue to work on them, look at them. They're going to vote on it. I do have a fear that I don't think it's fair to make the Board of Finance into the bad guys, or that they're going to have to do the jobs of the other boards. I mean, trusting that, I don't think that they're thinking too much differently than we are of what is the right way of expenses and that. I just want the boards to do their job. That makes the Board of Finance's job and our job a heck of a lot easier, because, then they're figuring out just what we need to pay for versus first, are we at the right levels and what projects make sense and what doesn't. So that's about where we are. If there's nothing else, there's a couple things coming down the road. Some of them will be addressed at Monday's Board of Selectmen meeting, including a dredging project that I believe have funds coming out of the general fund. There's another smaller one that has a general fund. And we also have a union contract, and we have to return to the truck and have that done. So I originally scheduled a meeting on President's Day, which, if we didn't have all this stuff, would work fine, except we're going to need Kate at our meeting. And, I like to keep Kate on our good side, and asking her to come on a meeting when she has her day off just doesn't quite get it there. So I'd like to, I also don't believe it's right to do that, period. So Peter had pointed that out to me a while ago. If it's okay, I'd like to move on Monday meeting on the 21st to the 22nd on Tuesday, so Kate can be there and we can get things done. I also just want to say, we have time to do this because the budgets aren't going to be presented to the Board of Finance. But, without question, the Board of Finance does want the input from F&B as they begin to formulate their own view of this. So as you have reviewed your budget section and you have questions and other things like that, on the Board of Selectmen side, forward it to Mark and myself, and then we'll figure out whether or not we're going directly to Kate on that. And then, we'll also send those questions over to the Board of Finance as well. Iris, sorry.
This is small, but you were mentioning about the alarm fund on the police side,
Mhm.
and that it should be brought back into the budgeting process and not hanging out there. I completely agree with it, but I think you ought to do it with the fire too, because it's more consistent practice, and it is a way for people to like keep to their budgets and not go off into these little funds and fun things.
Yeah,
So
I'm,
I think I think you just need to do it for both, for consistency purposes.
I'd like to try and get the first one done and hope that my car isn't ticketed for the next 2 years. Um, but the fire one's a little bit tricky. I know I can get. I believe I can get some support for the police because we are making the payments for that more so than the fire. So if I can get the first one done, then we can address the second one later.
I mean,
I don't know that they'll be ready to do both of them.
Disingenuous to say that they're not revenue because they are revenue. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
It's just a fact. It's money that comes in, so it should be part of our budgeting process.
Yeah. By the way, just a little aside because I'm getting texts from Mr. Palin during this meeting because he can't talk, but I can relate what he's texting me. So, moving both the police and fire into the town side is consistent with what's being done with those student activity funds on the Board of Ed side, which is what they had to do at the end of the last fiscal year by setting up the special revenue account and determining what their fiduciary and what they control. So again, these are things that I would like to raise. I'm going to try and get it to Kate and Monica beforehand. I'll give Monica a call this weekend to just say, here's some of the things we're thinking about. And, also obviously Jim and David are on the meeting, so they're hearing it as well. So, and I think that's important that if we agree with this, it gives strength to a position that the Board of Finance may be taking as well. I think we're pretty much lock and step in how, I can't speak for them, but from what I've heard, I don't think that the Board of Finance is too far off for what we've been saying about, wanting to be wise on how we use our general fund funds, how we bond, what we bond. And, I've worked with Jim for a lot of years. Some of us worked when he was chair of this committee. Jim doesn't make arbitrary numbers. So whether or not we can get there is one thing, but when Jim, as chair, said 2.5% and 3% expense growth, that's because he's looked at this over time. It wasn't just that he picked two numbers out of the sky and said, okay, this is what I'm going to say to the town and the RTM. So yes, we understand if we can't get to certain things because of the conditions, but exactly what James also reiterated, what are we doing to understand that under these conditions we have to do things? And I appreciate that he mentioned the Weed Beach, because I do recall we put that in the police department building on hold for a while until things came back, and they both got done. And nice jobs with what was done with both of them. So, other than minutes, is there anything else? No? Okay. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes? I have Beth. Do I have a second? I have Barry. All in favor, I'm supposed to ask if there's any no votes. Hearing no votes, I don't care about abstentions. You don't need to abstain anymore if you weren't at the meeting. We'll assume that they pass unanimously. Jenny, thank you very much for your hard work on that.
You're welcome. I have a question. Were we supposed to, when we moved the meeting to scheduled for Monday, February 21st, was that a motion? Did we need a motion to move that or?
No.
Okay.
What happens is that it becomes it's a special meeting. So usually I know what we're going to do, but in this one, I have to wait to see what we're assigned by rules because we're not supposed to add to a special meetings agenda. So we have to make sure everything that we have on that. So it may look like it's a long agenda, even if we don't spend a lot of time discussing certain things. But that way, if somebody wants to, we have the item on the agenda. So
Thank you.
that's the only thing. I just wanted to get the opinion of not everybody telling me, no, I don't want to meet on Tuesday, the 22nd. So after that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, me, Bert.
Yes. Bert. Did I see a cat's paw go up there, Bert?
No, the cat is gone. We have fun.
Yeah. Do I have a second? James is second. I'll have Mark second also. We'll put down 2 seconds. And with that, since nobody's going to vote no, this meeting is adjourned. Christian, thank you very much for having this meeting with us. Jenny, if you want, I know most of the people that were visiting here.
I took screenshots.
Okay,
But
super.
I'll
Thank
check
you.
it with you.
Okay. Yeah, there's 1 or 2. I don't know who they were. But anyway, thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Have a
Jared.
pleasant evening. Bye.